Welcome to Let's Talk Speak on It. I'm your host, Tamika Cozy. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Some years ago, a friend of mine, Latoya, was diagnosed with lupus. Lupus is a chronic illness that can affect all the organs within the body. According to the CDC, more women have lupus than men. Lupus is also diagnosed more often between the ages of 15 and 45. Today, we have Latoya Da Silva, and she will be sharing her experience. Help me welcome Latoya Da Silva to Let's Talk Speak on It. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, I'm Latoya. I am a wife, a mother of 3, and I am also a licensed cosmetology instructor who works at a multicultural hair company.
Oh, nice.
As a test salon stylist.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that information. So you do have lupus. Can you tell us when you were diagnosed with lupus?
I was diagnosed January of 2004, right after graduation.
What led up to you getting diagnosed? What was happening? What was going on?
So I just thought that I had like the common cold. I lived on campus, so a lot of my dorm mates were sick, so I thought that I just had like a cold. I felt a little drained, tired. I was going to the bathroom a lot, and my skin had started to change a little, but I thought that maybe it was just like tan,
So what was going on with your skin during that time?
It had just started to darken up, like not like suntan darkness, but like darken. So I just assumed that it was sunburn. So I went to my doctor in 2003 to just have a checkup, tell him I had a cold, asked for antibiotics, and he's like, "You look like no joke." He's like, "You look like death," and I was like, "Oh." He's like, "Yeah, most people turn this color like when like a limb or something is starting to die out." I'm like, "Okay." So he's like, "I want to run some tests and make sure everything is good." So they checked my hemoglobin, they checked my A1C. He's like, "You should probably not be standing right now because my..."
No, you're fine. Take your time.
And because my blood sugar was like somewhere around 500.
Okay.
He's like, nobody's blood sugar should ever be that high.
Yeah, that's really hard.
And so he put me on insulin, so I had to give myself injections. And he was like, not to go back to school. He was like, take some time to rest and we'll run more tests and see, what's what. And then he'll get back to me with what's actually going on. So we decided to stop my education. I went to go live with my grandma because at the time my mother was an over-the-road truck driver. And I stopped, went to go live with my grandma, and a couple months later, he was like, "Well, it's not diabetes like we thought it was. You have something called lupus."
At that time, did you know what lupus was?
I didn't know what lupus was. I had no idea, and I've never heard anybody talk about it. I was okay with the diabetes diagnosis because it runs in my family.
Okay.
So I was okay with that. And then when he was like, "Lupus," I was like, "Well, what's that? How did I get that? Can I get rid of it?" I had a lot of different questions. And he's like, "Well," at the time, he was like, "We don't really have support groups for people in your age range. So it's nothing that I could tell you, nobody that I can advise you to." So he was like, "But since I've had you on these insulin injections for so long, and I need you to come off of them so that we can put you on steroids, you have to go into the hospital." I stayed for maybe like a week so that they could adjust the medications and put me on the right ones, take me off the wrong ones. And then that became my journey researching, finding out, because there are different types of lupus.
Okay.
So it's the skin lupus, it's neonatal lupus that they find in babies. There's, I guess, postpartum lupus, and then there's what I have is called SLE, systemic lupus.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and what it does?
So systemic lupus is, well, lupus in general is your immune system not knowing what it's fighting. So it fights everything. It's just an autoimmune disease. Systemic lupus is your lupus attacking not just your skin, but it also attacks the organs. It attacks, it does different things.
Okay.
So I wanted to find support groups to help with that. But the more I talked to people, I think the more I feared finding out what would happen.
How are you processing all of that at that time? Like, knowing that you have lupus, not being able to find different support groups or someone to really talk to.
Oh, it was not, I don't think I just talked it up to, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Because once we found out what it was, my grandma wound up telling somebody else in the family, and then that family member was like, oh, well, so-and-so has lupus. You should give her a call. So I give her a call. I call her, and she's like, oh yeah, I have lupus. I've had it since I was a teenager. And she goes on to tell me, like, she hasn't been able to carry a child. She's had a bunch of different miscarriages, and then, like, as I talked to people besides her, other people were like, oh, well, I know somebody who had lupus, and it was always in the past. So what I got out of me having lupus was that I'm not going to be able to have children and that I'm going to die. So that was...
And that's a lot to take in.
It is. It was a lot to process. And so I broke up with my boyfriend, or at least I tried to break up with my boyfriend. I was like, well, I don't want you to just sit with me until I die, but he's like, no. He told me life didn't work that way. So that became my support besides my mom and my grandma.
You told your family. How did they respond to knowing that you had?
My grandma just watched me, but she had been watching me since we thought that it was diabetes. She watched what I ate. She watched what I drank. She, and my mom, when she found out what it was, because she didn't know what it was either, she left her job. She stopped driving over the road, and she took a job driving public transportation.
Okay. And
she went to libraries, got books, researched what I could eat. She helped me with the research journey. And one brother drew for me. He drew a bunch of different pictures of anything that he thought would make me happy. And my other brother made jokes because I would always be like, I just want to be normal. So like I would get sad and cry, and I'd be like, I just want to be normal. How come I can't be normal? And he'd be like, there's no such thing as a normal player. Everybody got something wrong with them. And I'm like, but why it have to happen to me? Because I do everything, right? So that became who I was. I would have anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and that's who I was for a good while. And I probably tried to hide it, so I would have friends come over and see me. And one of my friends had just had a baby at the time. And she's like, well, we could share this baby, She's like, it's okay, but that's not what I wanted.
You wanted your own.
I wanted my own.
And you do have 3 kids.
I have
right now.
3.
So you have been able to have kids.
I have.
Though you have lupus.
I have. It was a journey. My first one, we the doctors was like, well, you have to come to the doctor every week. So that began my journey. During the process of my first one, I wound up having a miscarriage. The doctors were like, well, it was just your immune system working against you, you know. And so it's like, okay. And I told my boyfriend, now husband at the time, that, you know, I didn't want to do it again. I didn't want to try again because it hurt. That loss hurts.
It can be very difficult going through something like that.
I still think about that baby. And then we wound up getting pregnant right after. The second pregnancy, my lupus started to attack the pregnancy, but so she never completely attached to my uterus.
Okay.
But she was content not being 100% attached, which is how she got her name. So her name is Naima, and it means content, you know. So
beautiful.
And then after that, doctors, steroid injections, and things of that nature. After I had her, I started beauty school, and then my lupus turned for the worse. So my lupus caused something called ankle vasculitis, and that's swelling of the blood vessels. And so at the time, I didn't listen to my body. I didn't go for cues and things, you know, because your body talks to you. Whether you pay attention to it or not, it talks to you. And so I had started to cough up blood. The year after I had her, I was in school. I was tired. And I was just like, maybe it's a cold. Just like before, it's a cold. You know, I'm not going to think anything of it. And I was coughing up blood. And one day, my husband was in the room, and I was like, I can't breathe. And it was literally the last thing I said. And he took me to the hospital, and it turns out that maybe a couple tiny blood vessels started to burst in my lungs.
Okay.
And I was drowning in my own blood. And so I go to the doctor, and we stay in the hospital. I mean, they put me in the ICU. I had to have blood transfusion, which was really difficult for me because I was raised as a witness, you know.
And so you can't have those
blood transfusion. And so I struggled, and it took my husband to be like, well, I need you here. Naima needs you here. We need you to be with us. You know, whatever it takes, I need you to be with me. And so I went off that, and I did the blood transfusion. And a couple months later, maybe 6 to 8 months later.
And how was that pregnancy from the first one?
So the difference was after the blood clots and things, the doctors were like, well, we know that this is ankle vasculitis mixed with lupus. So let's start chemo.
Okay.
And so I started chemo. Or I say chemo because most people don't know infusion as a word. Mm-hmm. They think transfusion instead of what I'm actually saying. Okay. So I did a rituximab infusion, which is a lesser form of chemo. Mm-hmm. And my body started to heal from that. And that's probably how I got pregnant. So this pregnancy was a lot different. I had more energy. She completely attached. She was 5 pounds when she was born, and that was the biggest difference for me because my first one, she was 2 pounds 11 ounces when she came out. 2 pounds 8 ounces right after they measured her for the second time, and I had to go visit her in the hospital every day. And every day I went, the nurses wouldn't let me, they wouldn't let me hold her. They wouldn't let me. And I felt like after she was out of the incubator and she was breathing on her own and all she had was the feeding tube, that I would be allowed to play with her because that's my baby. I had her, but the nurses didn't. And it seemed like they let the volunteers play with her more than they let me. So,
and how did that make you feel at that time, not being able to hold and to play with your child, watching others do so?
Like they didn't think I knew what I was doing, you know, like that I didn't have it all. And not that I cared what they thought, but she was my baby. She was my first baby. She made me a mother.
Yeah.
So I went to the doctor and I'm like, please just let me take my baby home. He taught me how to do the feeding tube. And he said, if I let you take her home, she has to come back 5 pounds. And he gave me probably about 2 or 3 weeks to get her to those 5 pounds.
And then after those 2 or 3 weeks had passed and you went back to the doctor, how many pounds did she weigh?
She was 5 pounds. I took her home and my mom was like, come on, let's do this. We got this. We're not letting this baby go. And she pureed strawberries and she fed her popsicles and she would snatch out her feeding tube and, you know, she didn't want it. I don't think she thinks she needed it. So, you know, one day she snatched it out and I was tired of putting it back in. So I left it out and she didn't have it when she went back to the doctor.
Okay.
He's like, well, she doesn't have a feeding tube. And I was like, I don't think she needs it. But she was 5 pounds. I told him I would have her at 5 pounds and she was at 5.
Awesome. That is amazing. Yeah. For anyone who's watching who has lupus or has just been diagnosed with lupus or even their family members, what would you like to say to them?
Take time out for yourself. Do self-care. Listen to your body because it talks to you. It tells you the things that you need to know. And if you pay attention to it, it helps it to heal itself because bodies are miraculous things. They heal themselves. For me, I've taken more time to listen to my body. To not eat processed foods because that causes inflammation. And then just listen, give your body time to heal. And then for people, family members of the people who are suffering through lupus, give them a break. Not feel pity for them. Just take time to know that they're going through something and it's major and it takes a lot. Before I get up in the morning, I pray. God give me strength just to make it through the day. And I do. God gives me that strength that I need to make life happen. So don't think that when they say they're not feeling good or they can't make it to something, that it's an excuse, because it's not an excuse. It takes so much for a person with lupus to push themselves to do things. So don't feel like it's them using their ailments as an excuse, because it's a really hard thing to suffer through. And also for the person with lupus, you are not alone. There are people out here who are going through something similar, even though every lupus acts different for everyone. There's somebody out there that's going through it with you. And the person that inspires me the most, because I have trouble, getting up, breathing, But there's this lady on Facebook and TikTok, and her name is Betty Swan. She's a lupus dancer, and she dances, and as she's dancing, there's little lupus facts that go across the screen, and she gives me, like, one day I want to be able to bust a move, and not be out of breath. So she my inspiration for getting up and, like, she my little lupus therapy, you know. So just
I'm very happy that you've been able to find someone to inspire you to continue to get up every morning.
You inspire me too.
Oh, thank you so
You
much.
do.
You inspire me your entire journey, and then you coping through it and still getting up every morning, being a wife and being a mom and finishing up your career for you. That's amazing.
That does it. Like,
thank you, Toya, so much for joining us today. We
Thank you
really
for
appreciate you sharing your story with us.
thank you for having me.
Next up, we have Jaun Don of Ginuy Gang performing Make.
No shade on fuck shit. Let's get some new shit exclusive.
I have a dream that all my niggas gon' make it. I have a dream that we gon' take over the nation. I have a dream that we gon' come together and stop hating. I have a dream that the future will be amazing. Now better days are coming, I can see it from afar. I will be low, but not because I'm a star. Just from the fact that I work so hard. I'm never lacking, always on guard. Mama, thank you for the lessons you gave. Thank you for all the blessings you made. Still working on that big house you crave. I promise you gon' see it when you see it brave. It's a new year, new me, okay? And I use that term very loosely. I'm tryna stack up this loose leaf. Talk tough and get beat, Bruce Lee. I get it back to back like a 2P. Off the drugs, Danny's had me 2D. Feds had me locked up for 2 weeks. Shit was crazy. Ever since then, I've been counting on my blessings. I keep some weed for my stress, giving niggas the lesson. I can cover hookers, I don't do no arresting. I wanna show my OG that I made it. So I work hard, stay focused, be patient. Wanna show my OG that I made it. I work hard, stay focused, be patient. Yes. I have a dream that all my niggas gon' make it. I have a dream that we gon' take over the nation together. I have a dream that we gon' come together, stop hating, put it out. I have a dream that our futures will be amazing. Black power. Now better days are coming, I can see it from afar. I will be known, but not because I'm a star. Just from the fact that I work so hard. On the grind, never lacking, always on guard. Got it on me. Mama, thank you for the lessons you gave. Thank you, mama. Thank you for all the blessings you made. Still working on that big house you crave. So I promise you gon' see it before you see it pray.
For joining us today, can you let our listeners know how they can follow you?
You can follow me on Snapchat, outwest196, Instagram, like.key96, or Twitter, DC_100.
Thank you so much for listening to Let's Talk Speak on It. If you have lupus, please remember that you are not alone. And for everyone, always listen to your body.